Hey guys, so today I have a book review of Gillian Flynn's Dark Places, another one of her wonderfully dark, creepy, disturbing thriller books. This is her second one. I have read Sharp Objects, which is her first, and then Gone Girl is her third, which I plan on reading relatively soon, now that I've finished this one. Like Sharp Objects, this book has a Missouri base for where a lot of the violence goes down. Basically, it follows Libby Day, who is the survivor of a murder. Her mother and two sisters were murdered in 1985 from somebody they don't know exactly who it was. They blamed her brother, Ben Day. He was the oldest sibling, and there were some rumors going around about satanic worship during the time, and basically it all led up to him being said he's the murderer, and Libby, who was only 7 when the murders happened, was sort of coerced by police and other people around her to sort of go with the idea that Ben Day was the murderer. And so she has spent the last 20-something years thinking her brother's the murderer, hasn't talked to him. Her father, who had an estranged relationship with her mother, he's in and out of the picture begging for money. She basically came from a very poor farming family, and now that she's older, she's kind of depressed and just not social. She doesn't even have internet in her house. And she's also not a very likable character, especially in the beginning. She doesn't care about anybody else. It's just, she's not somebody that you really want to root for in the beginning. However, as the story goes on, she does get better. Obviously, this murder's happened. It's introduced right at the beginning of the book, so the rest of the story is actually finding out the truth of the murders and what really happened, because what kind of story would it be if Ben Day was actually the murderer, right? She's approached by this group called the Kill Club. One of their leaders, his name is Lyle, and he sends Libby a letter and basically says, hey, if you come to this thing, we'll pay you $500 to show up and talk. And Libby has basically no money. She can't hold down a job. There was a certain fund that was started for her back when the rest of her family was murdered, and of course sympathetic people sent her money, but now that she's older, she's blown through it all. She has nothing left, and she decides, whatever, I'll do it for the money. Then she gets wrapped up in the story of finding out who was actually the murderer. She still believes it's Ben, and then eventually she starts to realize that it's probably not her brother. And the story kind of takes off from there, and we find out a lot about the people that Ben was friends with and how they were really a negative influence on him. And we also find out about the struggles that her mother faces, because not only does this book follow Libby's point of view, but it follows her mother, Patty, and her brother's point of view as well. That's the part that I didn't like about the book. I didn't like jumping perspectives. Normally, I don't mind, obviously, reading A Song of Ice and Fire, it jumps perspectives all the time, but I would have much preferred to just stay with Libby for the entire book. Jumping between Patty and Ben and Libby, I was just sort of, whenever it jumped to a Patty or Ben chapter, I just kind of, all right, fine, like that was, if I was waiting for a time to put down the book because I had to do other things, that's when I would do it. Whereas with Libby's chapters, I always kept reading because I liked her point of view best. I didn't like looking back before the murders happened, like the day before, leading up to it. I just liked reading Libby best, and I wish we didn't have to jump around. That being said, those Patty and Ben chapters did have some very serious clues that I might not have necessarily realized at the beginning were as important as when everything came together at the end. Things got a little crazy in the climax, then eventually everything sort of molds together and you're like, oh, right, okay. So it paid off in the end. Overall, I give this book a 3.5 out of 5 stars. Didn't love it. I wished it could have been better, especially because I've heard such wonderful things about all of her books, and I totally agree with what everyone says about Sharp Objects. So I was just hoping for a little bit more from Dark Places, I guess. If you've read Sharp Objects or Gone Girl, definitely, and you haven't read Dark Places yet, definitely read it. If you're looking for something that's a psychological thriller, a bit more involved with lots of different possibilities for characters being the murderer, it's definitely not obvious, then read this. It isn't as psychologically disturbing as Sharp Objects, but it is still pretty serious. As always, all of our links are in the doobly-doo. We got our Twitter, our Facebook, our Goodreads, all down there. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you later.